Okay, welcome everyone to this week's Kumi session. I'll go ahead and start us off and just provide a few housekeeping notes. One is that we record these sessions, so if you don't want your video camera to be on the recording, make sure that you turn off your camera at this time. And during our speaker's presentation today, if you have questions, please put those in the chat. And then afterwards, there will be a time where we can select some Q&A to ask of our speaker. And then following the time with our speaker, we will have our 10 to 15 minutes covering our Kumi actions, as always, every week. So there will be the first part of the webinar, which is our speaker, and then make sure to stick around to have a time to complete the actions together. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Salim, who will introduce our speaker for the week.
Thank you, Lily. Hi everyone, and I think the topic today is a very important matter, especially I'm sure many of you are following the news, and within the news that's still going on in Gaza, we're still seeing a dramatic and very dangerous systematic rise of illegal settler attacks on Palestinian villages and Palestinian farmers everywhere and Bedouin communities, and we asked our speaker, Angela, which I will shortly just give a short bio about her, and she would take us into more with her expertise and relationship with the Bedouins, and because of what's going on in Silwan and other places, where she's going to explain to us more the details of what's going on here in the West Bank area, which I don't know if much of the world news is covering what's going on here and only focused on what's going on in Gaza. So with us, the speaker is Angela, and if you give me a minute, I would like to read her bio. So Angela Godfrey Goldstein is a co-director with Fakhri Abu Diab of Jahalin Solidarity, a Palestinian organization she set up to support Jahalin Bedouins with the capacity raising and advocacy, especially with regard to their forcible displacement and that of East Jerusalem Palestinians in Silwan, and to advocate against the Israeli occupation. She was for many years Action Advocacy Officer with ICAD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolition, and Advocacy Officer for Grassroots Jerusalem, having previously been an environmental activist in Sinai, Egypt, where she lived for 4 years with Bedouins, together with Eid Abu Khamis, Jahalin. She was a Rebuilding Alliance Peacemaker Award in 2018. And Angela, please.
Thank you very much, Salim. And I wish I could say welcome to all of you. First of all, I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak, but you are visiting what, if you're on this call, you've probably always known as a very troubled, muddled East, unholy land. But you're also visiting at a time of enormous conflict. When I think the fig leaves are off and everybody can see what has been constructed over the years, which is to say it has never been sustainable. And when I've been guiding groups, I've always said that. People say, do you have hope? And my answer has been, well, this cannot keep going like this because there's no way that it's sustainable. And unfortunately, now we're really hitting the wall. The international community is not able to stop what is happening in Gaza. And if anybody has any clout with Congress, then they have to stop accepting AIPAC money, because I think that's one of the biggest problems that is preventing the Biden administration from coming down heavy on Israel for what has become really genocidal. And I've been asked today to talk more about the nation-state law, but I would say that the whole thing comes together in one basic construct, and that is that since 1948, there has never been an attempt by the Israelis to live at peace with their neighbors or to recognize the rights of Palestinians, the indigenous people on their land, their right to self-determination and statehood, or even under Judaism, to treat the other as you would be treated. And therefore, Israel in 1948 chose militarism. And with the Nakba, created, shall we say, a bad neighborhood. Because if you do not have any return of refugees, then the chances are you're going to have bad neighbors. And when people say, oh, we need the army because we've got so many, enemy countries around us. Personally, I lived for 4 years in Egypt. In Egypt, most Bedouin in Sinai think of all Israelis as killers, whereas the average Israeli here thinks of every Palestinian as a terrorist. So there's huge gaps in understanding, in education, but also the basic building blocks of statehood were based on that militarism, on supremacy, on our right to all of it, on policies that you can see now very clearly what has always been intended. For example, if we go back to 1967, in East Jerusalem, Israel annexed an extra 64 square kilometers and only zoned that 70 square kilometers, because East Jerusalem had only been 6 square kilometers until then. And if we have time, we'll look at some maps. Only 13% was ever zoned for Palestinian residential purposes. And that was already built on, meaning that in 1967, the Israeli authorities, whether it was the municipality or the government, decided on a path of forcible displacement, of getting them out. Let them go to Jordan. Let them go anywhere. And this is exactly what is happening now in Gaza with the massacres and the forcible displacement. There are settler leaders who say, let the Arab countries take them in. Keep pushing, they'll go, and others will take them in, as if people have no rights to life. And to be honest with you, look, I'm a Christian, okay? I grew up with a Jewish father and a Christian Anglican mother, and therefore I'm baptized and confirmed, but I did study a lot of Kabbalah. And in Kabbalah, you learn to get above the ego, to open the heart, to be more interested in the truth. And bearing in mind Jesus was Jewish, I would say that Judaism and Christianity both have at their heart love, truth, freedom, respect for the sacredness in life, and to treat the other as you would be treated. And that is not the case with any people who set out with their legislation, such as the nation state law, which says that we are the bosses here, that this is a land that is well, let me quote you what 2 Palestinian women academics wrote in 2018 when this law came through. The entrenched supremacy of Jewish settlers, the erasure of indigenous Palestinians, and with reference to borders, the effective annexation of those parts of historic Palestine that were occupied in 1967. So as a law, this was discriminating against Palestinian 1948ers. The Druze were very up in arms. And even the president, Reuben Rivlin, was in protest. He had to sign, so he people such as Yariv Levin, Yoav Kish, Avi Dichter, Bezalel Smotrich, Moti Yogev, Yinon Magal, and Netanyahu, amongst others. And those are hardcore settler messianics, many of them, but certainly supremacists, people for whom apartheid is really part of their intrinsic being. They do not want, as Smotrich once said, for his wife to give birth in hospital next to an Arab woman. And he describes himself as a proud homophobe and is a settler from Kumi. He's currently the Minister of Finance, and he also has a lot of authority within the IDF. So these are the people now who are in power. Yariv Levin, whom I mentioned just now, is the Minister of Justice. He is the man that was trying to force a judicial coup last year, and hundreds of thousands of Israelis went on demonstration protests to regain what they called democracy. I would say that was never really a democracy. How can you be democratic when you are completely ignoring 20% of the population? And if we look at East Jerusalem, 360,000 Palestinians who are not citizens, they do not have civil rights, they are considered permanent residents. And as I said earlier, the intention has always been to force them out. They have something better in their conditions than Palestinians in, for example, Area C. Couple of 100,000 people there who are living with the settlers and with that enormous violence in order to force them out of Area C into areas A and B. Area C being where the settlements are, where the border is with Jordan, where the water is, the farmland, and importantly, and we can look now, please, at map number 2, the second one that I sent you, Salim, because the intention of forcing displacement of Bedouin out of the E1 area, yeah, that's great. Now, if you look on this map, the very center, there is a white blob, yes, a large blob, and it has the wall route around it. There are about 300,000 Bedouin living there at the moment, and for the last 20 years or more, there has been an enormous effort to forcibly displace those people. In the 90s, many were moved to next to a garbage dump in Abu Dis, which is south of that white blob. In fact, if you go to our website, jahalin.org, you can see the film High Hopes, which is based on archive footage from the Associated Press and the BBC, showing that forcible displacement when it happened. We've won many awards with it, so it's a good film and worth seeing, about 14 minutes. And big bonus, Edward Said is in it. So the intention there is to get those people out of that area, finish the wall, and that closes off Jerusalem for access for Palestinians from the whole of the West Bank. They've already closed off the north and the south with the Bethlehem checkpoint, wall, settlement blocks. Same story in the north near Ramallah. So for these militant settlers who want Jerusalem enshrined as the undivided capital of Jerusalem, of Israel, sorry, and they say so, and that's part of that nation state law. For them, that is going to prevent the possibility of peace, not just a Palestinian state, because they are quite okay with allowing Palestinians to have small ghettos, Bantustans dotted around in the West Bank, which you can already see are being and have been developed in the last 20 years. But if they prevent access to Jerusalem in this way, that prevents the Palestinians from having East Jerusalem as their capital. It prevents access to the holy sites, whether it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre or the Al-Aqsa compound, universities, campuses, 7 specialist hospitals, and of course, crucially, that corridor from Ramallah, East Jerusalem, Bethlehem, being the heart of tourism revenues. And therefore, it would be also a huge financial loss for any future Palestinian state. And this is something that has been happening gradually over the years with, very little awareness by the average Israeli. I mean, I've only been politicized, I would say, in the last 20 years, and I've been an Israeli since 1981. Because I think most Israelis believed we were making peace. Everybody wants peace, let them get on and do it. And actually, you understand when you look at maps like this, and in a minute we'll go to the other one, that the intention was never to make peace. I left out also water in the Jordan Valley, the sovereign border with Jordan, and obviously the farmland there, which is the breadbasket. Water also down on the left, underneath Israel, Gush Etzion settlement block, and further up in the West Bank, the Ariel settlement block, where the water is. So if Israelis say, we offered everything, well, I'm sorry, you never offered even water. Never mind sovereignty with a border with Jordan, or freedom to move around, or contiguity, etc., etc. So this is all very much part of where we are today, except that in the October 7 attack, that really has accelerated all of these plans, because it has given Israel, the far right, which is in government, and a very cynical, opportunist prime minister who is avoiding jail and therefore wants continuous war. And everybody knows it. And he's very unpopular, although since the attack on Iran, that has given him a bit of a boost. But the fact is that this has allowed the worst elements of militarism, the most fascist, the most artificial intelligence generated, for example. So all of those elements have gone way out of control. And we are seeing on social media stuff that I guess may have happened in the past. I don't think necessarily the soldiers are committing atrocities that weren't committed before. But by now it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, they are posting, and they're proud of their, I wouldn't say their massacres, but they're proud of their atrocities. I'm kind of lost for words in a certain way. Let me just go through very quickly, and then you tell me how we're doing. A list here of early warning signs of fascism, which I've been flashing to various diplomats for years. And, in the past, you could tick off most of the list. I think now you can tick off all of it. Powerful and continuing nationalism. Yes, the average Israeli beats his chest. We are, the startup nation, number one in everything, and extraordinarily proud of being Israeli, proud of the flag, not seeing themselves as wanting to integrate with their neighbors and live peacefully and normal lives. Disdain for human rights. Identification of enemies as a unifying cause. We need those enemies. We need the world to be against us because it unites and it makes us the victims. And then we can forget about the fact that the Palestinians are far greater victims. Supremacy of the military, rampant sexism. I would say that's a little bit less today than it was. There was a time when it was very dangerous to be a woman soldier in the army, but that is less so. Controlled mass media, absolutely. We do not have a free press. We have an alternative press, which is doing great work. And I give a shout out to 972, to Mondo Vice, Democracy Now, and so forth. An obsession with national security, yes. It shuts everything down. It keeps people fear-mongered. It keeps them cowed. And they are not being educated for critical thinking in school. Why? Because critical thinking doesn't make you a good soldier. There's a book that Nurit Peledelchanan wrote. She's an educational psychologist, and she did a lot of research. I think she read something like 1,500 Israeli school textbooks and said, you know, Palestinians in them are dehumanized in many, many ways. And there is nothing in the Israeli school system that is challenging kids to question or to stand up for their rights or to refuse. And therefore, although we do have some brave kids who refuse to go into the army, generally speaking, it's not an acceptable position, to the extent that there is something like 1 suicide in the army per week. A friend of mine, Guy Davidi, who made that film for me, High Hopes, he has a film called Innocence, which covers the stories of some of those kids, many of whom were leaders. It's not a phenomenon of weak kids who, you know, are misfits, not at all. These are some of the most deeply thinking, conscientious, I say children because of my age, but of course they wouldn't accept that. Religion and government intertwined. Yeah, we have state and religion are one. This is the Jewish state. This is for the Jewish people. And as I said earlier, Judaism is totally out of the window in my view. Corporate power is protected. Yes, we are into neoliberalism here big time, especially where it's arms factories, which are coming through the military, many of them. Labor power suppressed to a certain extent. Yes, the labor unions are no longer the powerhouse that they were when Israel was a socialist country. Disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption, and fraudulent elections. I'm not sure that we have fraudulent elections, but what we do have is a really lousy electoral system whereby we don't have representatives. I don't have a member of Knesset or parliament that I can go to with my concerns, who represents me, as probably most of you have. We have a list system, and when elections are coming up, everybody comes around and wants us to vote for them, and that's the last you ever see of them. So you can go and lobby at the Knesset and just, you know, catch somebody in a corridor or strike up relationships and network. But generally speaking, it's a very unresponsive system that separates those in power from those whom they should be representing but aren't. And therefore, in that way, I would say it's also extraordinarily undemocratic. Now, Bedouin displacement I mentioned to you, and some of the worst situations at the moment are where violent settlers are attacking Bedouin and forcing them off their land. On the other hand, and the American administration is starting to sanction some of those people, but on the other hand, those settlers are funded by the government or by wealthy American right-wing billionaires. And therefore they are fulfilling, and know they are fulfilling, government policy. It may be with a wink or a nudge, but certainly we already have op-eds in Haaretz newspaper, which I should also shout out about, saying that actually sanctioning the settlers is the wrong thing. They should be sanctioning the government. So the Bedouin forcible displacement is one thing. I want to talk now a little bit more about what is happening in East Jerusalem. So Salim, if we could have that other map up, please. Yeah, great. And this is not a new map. It's, I think, 2011, but and we're working on getting it updated, but it more or less shows you the current situation. You see the old city. If you could make it as it was a bit bigger, then I don't have to squint, but if you can't, that's not a problem. Yeah, okay. So under the old city, you have the Bustan. Yeah, that's it, thank you. And that's the brown area as a sort of a V where it says Silwan, but next to it. And then that hatched blue And this is where, since 2005, the Jerusalem municipality and the government, the Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs, have been trying to forcibly displace what are now 1,550 Palestinians. And my co-director is the chairman of that residence committee. So we worked together in 2005 to prevent demolition then. And he had his home demolished on Valentine's Day this year, having in January hosted Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Yeah, thanks. I can see you're just highlighting with the thing. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Andrew Miller, Das Miller, in his home. Because over the years, we have always seen the international community as our address for putting pressure on Israel, asking them please nicely or threatening. Usually, I think it's only as far as words. I know that on this issue, when the demolition order, and Fakhri got a 10-day self-demolition order first, that the American ambassador was involved and Das Miller himself back in Washington, D.C. as well. But obviously, words aren't enough. And so we are now really calling for sanctions, for Israel to be held accountable, for certain people to be held accountable. Not just the ones signing off on the demolition orders, but for example, there is a deputy mayor, Aryeh King, who is a Kahanist. I don't know if you know what that means. It means he's a follower of the Rabbi Meir Kahana, who ran an organization called Kach. He was a member of the Knesset, and in the end, they were banned as a terrorist organization. So Aryeh King is one of his followers, and he actually runs the settlement called Ma'ale Zaytim, which is almost in the middle. It's to the right of the Bustan, up on the hill above. Now, if you look at this map, you will see the blue dots in the old city, the Jewish quarter. The hatched signs were up on the right-hand corner of the old city, Burj al-Laklak, where a settlement is planned. And then you will see the Bustan and all of those dots, and Ma'ale Zaytim, plus the blue arrows showing you the intention, the thrust of settlement development, preventing Palestinians from having the Holy Basin surrounding the old city as their normal homes, forcing them out. It's extraordinarily racist. It's extraordinarily violent and volatile. People are living under enormous pressure. I can tell you that my co-director has medical issues. He's diabetic, and the stress levels mean that, for example, 4 molar teeth fell out not long ago. He has a problem walking at the moment. He has a back problem. It's all stress related. And when I was at a large building that was due to be demolished about 2 years ago, I went out and there were a group of Palestinians sitting outside, and they were all taking different pills. And I was like, what's going on here? And this one got his antidepressant, and this one's got his stress, and this one's got his heart, and this one's got his diabetes. Everybody is sick. It's not something you see when you see a photograph of East Jerusalemites, but the pressure of this system, I can't say everybody, okay, I mean, you know, I'm sure we know people who are healthy, but generally speaking, it's a far greater phenomenon than is recognized. And again, if we think of what is happening in Gaza, over 300 bodies uncovered now at the Nasser hospital. I think it was over 200 at Shifa. Doctors, patients. I have a friend in Rafah that I'm in touch with regularly, and he has an eye problem. Today, finally, a delegation of doctors is in Rafah, and I'm hoping to hear from him that he got to see somebody. But a few years ago, I was trying for over a year to get him out, in order to get to St. John's here to have an operation. And by the time we got further down the line of, refusal, try again, refusal, try again, third time lucky, it was too late. So the human rights are not being recognized, obviously. Self-determination is not something that Israelis are prepared to consider. And I think international pressure has to be much more. The Israeli public is anti-Netanyahu, maybe wants elections at the moment, maybe inclined still to two states, but not prepared to dismantle settlements or go back to the Green Line or consider a non-militarized way of living. I know people in two organizations that are really thinking into the future, and they do have hope. How we get from A to B, I really don't know. And I didn't see a clear plan yet from them. One is called Omdim B'Yachad, Standing Together, which is a grassroots movement, originally started by a member of Knesset when he left the Knesset, Dov Hanin, from the Communist Party. And the other is A Land for All, which talks about having an open system, some sort of confederation, whereby refugees can come home. Anybody can live anywhere, but if I'm Israeli, I vote for Israel. If you're Palestinian, you vote for Palestine, but nobody has to move. And therefore that would solve many of those problems. Would it deliver to Israelis their safe, ghettoized habit? No. It would require an enormous rethink. But somehow that has to happen, whether it's intergenerational or sooner, because frankly, where we are now is kind of terrifying, in as much as the level of trauma on the Palestinian side, the number of orphans, the fact that people are left without housing or education or educational facilities, or doctors, hospitals. Gaza is more than a nightmare. And I really fail to see how in the coming period we will live together without having to face the additional hatred, anger, pain, trauma that we have caused. And when I say we, I mean the Israeli authorities. I don't necessarily identify with that because I'm not a nationalist. I happen to believe we're all human and that's it. And we're all on one planet. I've talked a heck of a lot. Other questions now? Do you think it's time? Salim, what do you think?
Sure. If anyone, please have any questions, you may raise your hand so we could unmute you, or you could write it on the chat. Deborah, you could unmute.
I just want to say that in the UK, we've got a very right-wing government, which is just voted the Rwanda plan. They were going to send refugees to Rwanda in Africa. They managed to get it through. They just sound as bad as the Zionists. They're Zionist friends. And if you talk about a fascist state, we think we're going down that road because they've just had a go at the disabled. They just said that we're a waste of space, basically, that we're costing the government too much. And this is in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's quite frightening in that our democracy is also being challenged by these politicians who have so much power.
So I would say to you, Deborah, I didn't hear a question in there, but I would say to you that I hear you and I read the news, and I'm English originally, I'm a Londoner, and my mother was
Yeah.
from Manchester, my father from the East End. So I get all of that. On the other hand, it has to be said that the epicenter of demonstrations calling for justice for Palestine and for freedom are in London.
Yes.
And I would
because
say also that if you look, hold on one second, please. If you look at what's happening on the university campuses in the United States, that generation is now the way forward. How long it will take, I can't say. Will it stop more massacres? I doubt it. But I do have hope in that direction. But I'm absolutely with you as far as sending people to Rwanda, and, you know, the United Nations special rapporteurs are speaking out against it. Everybody is. But I hear you. Yeah. And I feel very
sorry,
strongly also about
I'm
migrants.
autistic, so I don't go on demonstrations because I get overwhelmed, but I have been campaigning.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason I supported the Palestinians, was because of what's happening in the UK. And they wanted to make it a law against boycotting Israel.
Absolutely. And they've done it. And they've done it all over the world. And that's something that I think people can see, and they feel the injustice of it. But that's also why I was saying that there is a huge need to take on AIPAC. I've lobbied on the Hill with the amazing women of Code Pink. And I've seen recently that they're still doing it. If you go and Google Code Pink on Instagram, you will see people like Medea Benjamin taking on some of these people. And there was a very good webinar just this week whereby John Mearsheimer, Professor Mearsheimer, and Stephen Waltz, who wrote the original essay, The Israel Lobby, or The Lobby, I think it was called, and then wrote a book. They've now refreshed it and updated it. In that webinar, they're talking about how the lobby is impacting Biden's inability to deal with Israel and to prevent what's happening in Gaza. So I hear you, and I do believe these are the sort of problems we have to wage. I mean, I'm even completely overwhelmed at the knowledge that almost every day there are migrants drowning in the sea, whether it's the Mediterranean or the Channel. And I really can't understand how people are allowing that to happen in days of climate, when we have to understand the needs. Some of those are just people looking for work. Some of them may come from overpopulation as a spin-off, but many of them are because of the huge impacts now of climate. And I mean, let me read you very briefly, I hope we've got time, something. I had a conversation in 2013 with someone called Ron Dermer, who is currently a minister. He's in the War Cabinet as an observer. And at the time that I had this conversation, he'd just been made ambassador to the United States. So I saw him outside my post office, and I thought to myself, that looks like Ron Dermer. So I went back and I sat down in the post office, got out my iPhone, Googled, looked at him, looked at it. Oh, yeah, it is. And went out and I said, excuse me, I think you're Ambassador Ron Dermer. Am I right? And he said he was chuffed as hell because he was newly appointed. Oh, yes, that's right. So I said to him, can I ask you a question, please, sir? Oh, sure, go ahead. Well, you people aren't very serious about peace, are you? Oh, no. Of course we want peace, but takes two. Got to have a partner. And I'd just been up Mount Sinai with a group of very amazing women, and I was kind of very centered and calm and at my best, shall we say. So I just went straight back at him. No, the Palestinians want peace. Oh, oh dear. So I say here, regrouping with a sly smile. So what's your solution then? And I said to him, we have to open our hearts and be generous. Give them what they need to be able to be at peace with us, and stop this shook mentality, in the knowledge that as the stronger party, we must be the ones giving, and then go on to save the planet. He fled. No eye contact, mumbled thanks, shifty avoidance, fled. They do not want to make peace. They want to keep on with the lies.
Oh, I know they don't.
And they don't understand.
I know they don't.
By now, everybody knows they're lying. I've been telling diplomats for years, they lie to you and they watch closely to see if you're going to call them out. And because you're a diplomat, you don't. Don't listen to what they say, go see what they do.
Exactly.
One of the lessons
I've written to my MP and he wants to sell arms to Israel. He doesn't care about the people. We've got it on our doorstep.
Yeah.
Just
And then
down the
they'll
road.
say it's jobs. They'll say it's jobs. But I was in Italy once, and there was when they banned the landmines, Jody Williams, who won the Nobel Prize for it, was saying there was one landmine manufacturing factory and the women went on strike and said, find us other jobs. We shouldn't have to be doing this. Anyway, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we do.
How are we doing time-wise? Are we okay?
We have about, Lily, do we have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Probably closer to 5 to finish up the Q&A so we can do our actions.
Yes,
Which also, I know, Angela, you also have a call to action. We could also present that as well.
that would be great. That's Fakhri's rebuilding campaign.
Okay, so Diane, if you can ask a question.
Hi, Angela. This is Diane Rowe.
I know you.
I know you.
I was staying with Kathy Kamphofer in Cairo last week.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
We're
gosh.
talking CPT, Christian Peacemakers Team, Hebron. How are you?
I am good. I'm just as overwhelmed by what's going on as you are, and I was hopeful to see the Freedom Flotilla that's leaving soon for Gaza.
Yeah.
And
I was with the Free Gaza movement for some years, but I'm not involved in this particular flotilla. Yeah.
remembering the people who had gone before, Anne Montgomery was on that first one, and Mary Hughes Thompson, and so I'm remembering
Aliyah Hamma, and also Epi, what was her name? Holocaust survivor, Epstein.
Yes, I was just trying to think of her name recently.
I'll Google it and get to it. Begins with N.
It was, and I was, but you reminded me of that, and well, I was going to say, of course, I know what's going on in the South Hebron Hills and what the settler attacks and everything like that. I also have a family I'm very close to in El Azariah, Bethany, and they get the of all the things that are going on with Ma'al Adumim and the Jahalin, they get the brunt of it too. It's just it's everything. Well, it's so good to see you, and thank you.
You too. Hedy Epstein, Hedy.
Yep.
Aliyah Hamma. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Maureen. Indeed, it came to me at the same time. Okay.
Thank you, Diana. Colin.
Thank you very much, Salim, and thank you very much, Angela. I'm sorry I missed the introduction, but I've been fascinated to listen to your exposition. Just looking at my notes, intention never to make peace, the Israeli intention never to make peace. I take that on board, what you're saying. Many thoughtful people that I come across ask why the Palestinians didn't accept, was it the UN offer of 40% in 1948 of the territory? Was that because they already had 90% and didn't want to give it away? But many people I hear a lot of people saying, not a lot, but quite a few, why didn't they accept the 40%? They don't know the details. Can you fill them in?
Colin, I'm not going to have time to fill in all the details. I can tell you that many of those old tropes are the things that I heard when I arrived in Israel. They're the problem. They keep rejecting peace. We are the good guys in the bad neighborhood, the villa in the jungle. We gave them everything, generous offers, etc., etc. I then edited the guidebook Palestine and Palestinians in about 2003, and that was for me a huge learning curve. Why would people who had either land ownership or control of, if I'm right, it's about 94% pre-state days of the land, why would they agree to give away at least 50% of what they own? And if you look at the numbers of how many Jews were here, living here, pre-flooding waves of refugees incoming from the Holocaust, again, it was a very small number. And if you look at why were there uprisings in the 20s and again in the 30s under the mandate, it was to do with land deals with people who were peasant farmers having the land that they'd worked on for generations taken from under them by land dealers, Jewish ones in Damascus or in Beirut or others in Turkey. So again, it's very easy to make that accusation, but it's much harder to go into the details and then see, no, these are the people who had the indigenous rights, the land rights, the title deeds, who still have the keys. And it's much easier to look in the mirror and say, they're the problem, we're the good guys, instead of we are settler colonialists running an apartheid state here. I had in 2009, I got EU funding for a project, house demolitions, home demolitions, and apartheid, because I guided John Dugard and Richard Falk, and they were talking apartheid. So yeah, it's something that I wish I was a historian, but I don't have any, questions between me and myself on this. Having said which, yes, there were Jewish people living here for generations pre-state days, but not that many. Okay.
Thank you, Angela. Colin, can I just add one quick note for your question? I like to always represent this situation within the Bible. The first Kings 3 from 16 to 28, which is the very, very well-known story of King Solomon and the dividing of the baby between the two mothers.
Oh,
the real mother, the mother who basically the indigenous people of this land, they were willing to not divide it, but give it all, than rather dividing it, because as an indigenous, as the mother, she knows the true meaning of her baby. She knows the true meaning. We know the true meaning of the land. So 40%, 10%, 90%, the idea of dividing it, it doesn't make sense. Yet the colonizer, because they don't have any real attachment, they would really agree with whatever. So this is my answer to you when it comes from a biblical perspective.
and if I can just, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, again, thank you, Angela. And I know.
Can I just add one little
Sure.
point to what you're saying? Because that lesson in the Bible for me is when Jews tell me that love is about Christianity and Jesus' teaching, I point to that and I say, that is actually a supreme lesson in love. When the heart is engaged, sacrifice is instinctive to keep life alive. And therefore, I do believe that the heart is at the core of all the three monotheological.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Angela. From the comments, we can see that a lot of people have really appreciated what you've been sharing. They have learned a lot. And we will give it to you, Lily, so we could start with our call to actions.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Salim, and thanks, Angela. First of all, for our action, we want to support the work that Jahalin is doing. So, Angela, if you want to just briefly for a moment explain the action, and I'll show the website page to sort of walk people through where they can find this information, but I'll let you explain if you have time.
Thank you so much, Lily. Yeah. So at the moment, what we are trying to do is fund Fakhri's life, really. I mean, he has been totally shattered. And if you go down the website a little bit further, keep going down if that's feasible. Yeah, further. Here we are, projects. So there, you just go up a little bit more. There you go. What if this was your home? Now, when you click on there, you will see there's a link in England to the Charities Aid. Yeah. And that can be donated too. There is also the New Israel Fund, but actually that's a bit clunky. So it's feasible just to go to our website, jahalin.org, and click on donate if you're able to. Otherwise, as I said earlier, I see advocacy as the most urgent physical thing that people can do. Speak to your members of parliament, speak to your members of Congress. We want to get the message out to the German government. You know, this instinctive knee-jerk response that anything Israel does, we can't criticize. No, come on. So the European Parliament is in elections at the moment, but we hope to get the message there as well. And obviously the British Parliament. I just recently drafted a letter for members of Parliament to sign through Kabul for them to send to the Foreign Secretary, calling for a total moratorium on all demolitions and for zoning and planning in East Jerusalem so people can build legally. At the moment, nobody can build legally. And they're being told, you know, that, oh, this is criminal behavior. Of course, we have to demolish. Well, allow them to build legally, give them zoning and planning on land that they own. And that, yeah, I think I covered it. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. Yes, and that link is shared in the chat and also can be found on the Kumi Now website for our actions for next week. We certainly encourage you, if you have the means, to give to this initiative. Fakhri Aboudiab is also a good friend of Sabeel, and we've been following the situation of him in his home since that Valentine's Day. So thank you for sharing this. For our last 8 minutes, we're going to go through our usual Kumi actions of the week. So Angela, again, thanks for being with us, but no worries if you're unable to remain for this part. This is our Kumi action time. But yeah, thank you again. And we're very grateful for your presentation.
Thank you. Bless you.
For the past 2 weeks, we've been sharing this change.org petition on the Temple Institute's initiative to sacrifice a red heifer on the Temple Mount compound. And we are now going to promote the webinar that Sabeel, in partnership with Friends of Sabeel, is hosting surrounding this event. I'm just going to share my screen also to show you the Zoom registration page. If this will work. This webinar will be, one moment. The webinar is entitled Red Heifers from Texas and Misguided Attempts to Build the Temple, Countering the Destructive Consequences of Christian Zionism and Third Temple Extremism. So the link to register for this is shared in the chat as well. We encourage you to attend this webinar where Alex Awad, Shadia Kupti, Steven Sizer, and Adi Domsky will be sharing. And this webinar is also in preparation for the launching of a website called the Institute for the Study of Christian Zionism. And so this conversation is centered around building the momentum for this, which will be a resource to counter Christian Zionism and ideologies that are leading towards extreme events such as this. So we encourage you to fill out the registration for this important Zoom event as our first action. If you have registered, we'd love to hear in the chat if you've done that. So I'll just give 1 minute for everyone to pull up that link for the registration. Great. Good to see that you all have registered for this event. That will be Monday, April 29th at 7 p.m. Jerusalem time, 7:30 p.m. Jerusalem time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, and 9:30 on the Pacific Coast time. We have a regional action for our attendees from the U.S. today regarding the legislation that was recently passed in the House, which is approving $17 billion in additional military supplies to Israel, along with $9 billion pledged in humanitarian support. However, this bill also continues the prohibition of U.S. funds to UNRWA. So in our action this week, there's a link where you can check to see how your representative voted on this bill, and then write to them either thanking them for voting no or urging them to stop funding Israel using the template that's included from the U.S. Palestinian Campaign for Rights. This unfortunately is only for those of our attendees who are U.S. citizens. However, we continue to encourage everyone from around the globe to contact your representatives, continuing to urge for a ceasefire and the ceasing of funding Israel military supplies. I'm quickly going to share my screen yet another time just to walk you through this site, since I don't think we've used it yet for a Kumi action for US. This is how you can see specifically how your representative voted on this action. And if this is too much to do now while you're on the call, once again, this link is in the chat and in our newsletter, so you can see, but this is how you can see if your representative voted for or against this bill. So here I would just type the name of my representative, and then it will show up here. And you can see that they voted yes to pass this. So in which case I would customize the letter template and explaining that they voted to pass the legislation, expressing my disagreement with this, and pointing out the hypocrisy between continuing to send military funding and at the same time as humanitarian aid assistance. So this is a really helpful tool as you continue to write constituent letters to your representatives, just in general, even beyond this legislation. So that concludes our US action. And then our final action is also a repeat from previous weeks, which is 2 weeks ago during our Kumi session, we took time to watch the 10-minute short film, which was produced by one of our partners, the Bisan Center, which is highlighting the Israeli occupation's targeting of hospitals, health facilities, and basic supplies in the Gaza Strip. It's 10 minutes long. We encourage you to watch and share with people in your community to continue to raise awareness to the atrocities that are being committed in Gaza, and share that video widely as it was created by one of our partners. Sorry if that was a lot. We're very happy to support our ongoing actions. And I also see that some of you are sharing things in the chat about more information, also supporting the flotilla movements. And yeah, just like Randy has said, it's important to thank our reps who voted no, but even more important to call your senators' offices to say vote no. And this is an important point on the US action because it's been passed in the House, but will still go to the Senate. And we would obviously hope that our activism and advocacy could prevent that bill from going through and being passed by all of Congress. So thank you, Randy, yes, for that point. If there are any questions on any of these actions, we have another minute or two. Feel free to ask any question in the chat if you need help, or raise your hand. And we will assist you this time. What is the Senate number of the bill?
It's the same bill number. It's HR 8034 because it's come over from the House of Representatives. So
Yeah.
all you have to do is just call your senator's office, say vote no on HR 8034. They'll know what you're talking about.
Thank you, Randy. That's helpful. I'm putting that in the chat also. Okay, if there are no further questions at this time, we'll go ahead and end this time of our Kumi actions. Angela, I see you've stuck around, so I just want to thank you again for being with us. Thank you to Salim for helping moderate, and Ryan always for doing the work in the chat. And thank you, all of you, for being here to continue to learn and participate in these actions and advocacy for Gaza, but also for the ongoing struggles that are occurring in the West Bank and with communities such as the Bedouin communities. So thanks everyone for being here, and we hope to see you next week.